So, good evening, everyone, and ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon for those that are now following us on my YouTube channel from the Americas. I hope everyone can see us and listen to us. Yes, I think everything is okay. So, and also good afternoon for those that are now following us on my YouTube channel, on not only from the Americas but also from Eastern Asia as well. So from Far East, just a minute because my another window opened. So also particular welcome to everyone from Iran. Salam. I can only speak few words. Salam, Chetori, Hubi, Khodafis. Not more than that. I've been to your country. I visited several cities and I have enjoyed and learned a lot while I was there. And I really love the Iranian people as well as its culture. My today's guest is an Iranian citizen. She's presently a freelance journalist based in Tehran. During her already long career, she has written for several Iranian publications, and she also collaborated with highly reputed media outlets like the Al Monitor, which is an outlet most people in the West don't know how good it is, to at least to give some access to facts and assessments on issues relating to some Muslim countries. Also Press TV. Here in Portugal, we have access to Press TV as well. It's covered and it's offered, provided by the cable services, as well as my guest also collaborated for Al Jazeera, very popular media outlet, as many of you know. She also holds a master's degree in women's studies from the University of Tehran. This also means that she doesn't have a perspective on women only as an Iranian woman, but also as an academic, someone who studied the woman from a scientific point of view. And I must say, I started following her first because I honestly value the fact that she is from Iran. She lives in the country. She is in the ground. She is not like most of a huge majority of the pundits and the reporters in Western countries that have never been there, are not there, but they dare to create an idea and to express a prejudiced idea about Iran and about the events in the country. But she knows also and understands the country and the region better than the average citizen, not only from the perspective of a citizen, but also from the perspective of a journalist, someone who has a duty to follow the events on the ground and share the reality. I also like a lot to read her thoughts on contemporary issues of Iran because she criticizes, but she also praises, and she is quite clear and she touches the main point of many problems in the country. When I invited her and I announced her, someone wrote on my Twitter something like this: I'm trying to understand if she supports the political power or not. I couldn't get to a conclusion yet. And for me, this should be seen as a confirmation of how serious she is and how professional also she is and how good journalist she is. Because my guest is no activist, she is a journalist. On my opinion, she's one of the best persons to follow if you want to know more and understand Iran. It's an honor for me to have her with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Fereshteh Sadeghi. Dear Mrs. Sadeghi, firstly, let me thank you for accepting my invitation and being with us today. When I was in Iran, people had a lot of consideration for Portugal, not only because of Carlos Queiroz, Tim Melli's coach, or Iran's national team, but also because of the long history built over the years and over the centuries between our two nations. I don't know if you have that idea, but according to one Portuguese historian, it were the Persians who, around 500 years ago, taught the Portuguese how to drink wine, because we used to use a lot of water. And then it was when we had our first diplomatic mission in Persia that we learned how to drink wine. This is just a singularity. But you also have the fort of Our Lady of the Conception in Hormuz Island, the Castle, also known as the Castle. But over the last decades, we haven't heard much about improvements between the two countries. How do you think the political power in Iran look at Portugal these days?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. And it's an honor for me also to talk to you and to send my voice to your audiences. Anyway, thank you very much again for having me. The relation between Iran and Portugal, I think because Portugal is a member of the European Union and the government of Portugal somehow follows the policies or foreign policy of the European Union, is not at its best form, I think, and I guess, but it's not it's not hostile as well. So you can say there is an ordinary relationship between them, though I can say that until a few months ago, the Portuguese embassy in Tehran didn't issue visa for Iranian citizens. That's what I saw on the billboard of the embassy's board. But I don't know if they issue visa for now. But over the past few years, I think their relations has been very normal, not very friendly, but not hostile either.
Nice. So, considering that situation, which would you consider to be the real allies of Iran in the present, and why is that?
Considering the current situation that Iran has, especially in the past few years after the failure of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or the 2015 nuclear deal, and after the recent protests and some human rights issues that have been raised by the US and the European Union with Iran and against Iran, I think main allies of Iran right now are certain Arab countries, such as, I can say Syria, Iraq, which is one of its neighbors. We have friendly relations with our neighbors, most of our neighbors, Pakistan, India, but the main allies, I can say, are China and Russia, especially given that Iran and the new government of Iran, President Raisi, has stated that Iran is going to pursue an East look policy. So I can say the main allies are China and Russia.
So you think that presently Iran is kind of forgetting the West and investing all its diplomacy towards East?
Yes. You can say that, and it wasn't Iran's choice. In 2015, Iran really showed goodwill gesture. It signed the nuclear deal. And then after all the events that happened, after the assassination of General Soleimani, after the US President Trump vetoed the US from the deal, Iran still was committed to all its commitments after even a year or two after the US had left it. But it seems that Iran, as long as it shows goodwill, the other side doesn't show that goodwill, doesn't show a response, doesn't show that proper reaction that is needed to build a relationship. So with this government, which belongs to conservatives, and it doesn't belong to the reformist camp or President Rouhani, it is not close to the previous government of President Rouhani or Foreign Minister Zarif, we can say that Iran it has not forgotten, but it seems that it doesn't count on the West anymore, and it is pursuing it is pursuing to go and deal with the Eastern Bloc rather than the Western Bloc.
So, considering that, how do you see presently the relations between Iran and the Western Bloc, especially it's led by the United States of America, but also with the European Union, which at least minimally in the letter or in the spirit of the writings that I often read here from the European Union, it seems that the European Union is open or expresses to be open to have Iran back to the good relations times, but at the same time, we don't see much actions. How do you see the relations presently between Iran and this so-called Western Bloc?
With the US, the situation is, it's obvious. It's crystal clear that there is a problem between the Iran and the US. And the problem doesn't belong to today or last year or 2015 deal. It is a 4-decade or more than 4-decade issue, but the hostility, we can say, between the Iranian nation and the US government has started since 1953 coup against the US and UK orchestrated coup against Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. But because the Shah of Iran was supported by the US, it didn't come to surface until the 1979 revolution. After that, there was the hostage-taking crisis, and then there was the war between Iran and Iraq, which was supported and funded, totally funded. It is documented. It was supported by the West, especially the United States. So the situation with the United States is crystal clear, and there is hostility between them. With the European Union, at times it has become better, at times it has worsened their relations. So, for example, during the 2015, between 2013, 2014 to 2018, something like that, there was a sort of rapprochement, there was friendly relations. But as long as Iranians also accuse the European Union of following the US's policies. And then they usually accuse the European Union and some European countries of not being independent in their own policies. So I can say, with the European Union, it's not hostile. There is no hostility, but it is not a very good relations. No, we can't say that, especially after these protests, after the recent protests, which we will talk about them later. And then some UN, some resolutions against Iran, some remarks by foreign and especially European parliamentarians, European officials, European leaders, which Iranians consider them as meddling in their affairs. The relation, we can say, it's not very friendly. Let's put it in this way.
Do you believe that the United Nations presently is a great solution to solve any kind of tension rising between Iran and some Western Bloc countries, or do you think that Iran should focus more in informal forums like, for example, the BRICS?
I think the United Nations has no place in all these, crises and all these disputes. Iran and the US, whenever they want to talk to each other, there are some channels, diplomatic channels. It's Switzerland, it's Qatar, it's Oman. Even if they decide to talk to each other tomorrow morning, they can go to Oman and talk to each other. So there is no problem with the channels that they connect with each other or they get together and talk to each other. The problem is with Western's approach towards Iran and the way that they look at Iran, and they want to impose their own values or their own standards, which in a country like Iran, sometimes it doesn't work simply. So Iran has no choice but to go to alternatives. And the BRICS is very good at alternative, especially given that, for example, a country like Brazil, one of the biggest economies in Latin America, is a member of this organization. And then China, India. So Iran has other choices too. And Arab countries, especially Arab countries, neighboring countries, Persian Gulf states. So we have other alternatives to follow. It depends on the government. It depends on the Iranian government and those governments too. But there are always alternatives. Not necessarily. All roads are not led to Rome, to the West. There are always other roads to pave.
The problem was that at first, after 1945, the United Nations was seen as the main source of commitment to be formed between all countries in the universe, and Persia was also back then also involved in the project. But suddenly it seems that to discuss or to take care to deal with any kind of problem before the United Nations, it doesn't give the proper answer to the most difficult issues that the world is facing. So some people here discuss whether the United Nations is a kind of League of Nations too, and if it's going to end, and if any other forum can be formed or not. But at the same time, many people don't believe that that could happen. But what actually could be your idea of the United Nations itself? Because the Security Council is permanently divided, and the General Assembly has not enough powers.
No, the United Nations, if you look at the United Nations, for example, United Nations has all its offices in Iran. It has its own office in Iran. But when you look at it, it has never helped Iran at all. We haven't seen any benefit from the United Nations, and the Iranian authorities usually accuse the United Nations of being the tool for pressure. For example, what kind of pressure? For example, sanctions at the UN General Assembly, UN Security Council resolutions, for example, sanctions that the United States has forced the UN to impose on Iran. So we see it has been just headache. I don't say we shouldn't have relations with the United Nations. No, it is an international organization. But Iran has never been invited. For example, Iran has never been invited to be a part of peacekeeping forces, even in some countries that Iran has friendly relations. It seems that the United Nations also has tried to marginalize Iran. We can say Iran is among the countries that they are marginalized by the United Nations. So what's the use of working, actively with this organization as long as it doesn't benefit to you? It doesn't have any benefit to you. But again, I'm a journalist. I have my own ideas. Maybe the Iranian authorities have another idea. Maybe the foreign policy, the foreign ministry has another idea. That's up to them. But to me, if you ask me, I say it doesn't have any role in Iran, really. Because whenever there are disputes between Iran and the West, they themselves have solved it with the help of some neighboring countries, especially Arab countries, as Channels or Switzerland. But what was the role of the United Nations? Nothing.
Indeed. And so presently, many analysts say that Iran is getting closer to Russia. You already mentioned that Russia is seen as a key partner to Iran, but what kind of relation does Iran has with Russia presently?
When you look at Iran and Russia's relations, we just look at them in the context of, for example, contemporary history. But Russia is a country, and the UK actually, are two countries that they are in Iran for more than 200 years, maybe 300 years, 3 centuries. They are involved in the Iranian politics. So you can't say, oh, Iran has relations and Russia is our neighbor. It had a very strategic partnership with Iran in Syria against the Daesh, and is supporting President Assad. And then it was the country that when the Germans left Iran after the 1979 revolution, when Iran tried to start its nuclear program and construction of nuclear power, it was the Russians who finished the uncompleted job of the Germans. So you see, the relations is something that dates back to centuries and decades. When it was at the time of before revolution, even before the Shah's revolution, for example, until a century ago, Russians also meddled in Iranian politics, internal politics, a lot. But after that, the situation changed. So the relation, I can say it's a strategic relations, it's a neighborly relations, and then with the Ukraine war, and then all the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia, the countries, the West, even we can say, push them more together. The US, it was the US, US always criticizes Iran for getting closer to Russia, but it doesn't say that it was my own behavior, it was my own policies that pushed Iran towards Russia. This is the fact. This is the same thing when it comes to China. So Russia is a supplier for Iran in some, I think industrial supplies, and then Iran is providing Russia with some knowledge, military knowledge that the Russians don't have it, about drones. And then it is a relation that it is working, and as long as it is working, okay, it is working. But I should say that there are critics in Iran, in the Iranian society, that they are critical of Iranian Russian relations, and they usually criticize the government for having this relation, for expanding the relation. But sometimes you have no choice. You have to do something. You have to expand your relations. Okay, West doesn't work. Okay, let's go to the East.
I've even read some weeks ago that Iran is going to provide and to sell Iran Khodro cars to Russia because of the sanctions from the West. So maybe this could be an opportunity for Iran as well to have other markets and to export products like this, like the Iran Khodro, for example, and many other brands. But how do you think that Iran looks at the present situation in Ukraine?
Iran, the stated policy is that we don't meddle in the war, we don't take sides. Though Iran is a partner with Russia, is a strategic partner. So Iran, the stated policy is that we are neutral. We have heard about the drones that Russia uses in the Ukraine war, and they say that they are Iranian drones. Iran has admitted that they provided Russia with certain drones, kamikaze drones, and they say that we provided Russians before the war in Ukraine started. So there are some military cooperation between the two countries, and let's say Ukraine was not a friend of Iran either. It has been one of the countries that whenever there was a resolution against Iran at the United Nations, it voted to the resolution because of its relationship with the West and with the UK, with the US and with the European Union. So Iran, I think it was a good country that didn't jump on the bandwagon to totally support Russia or to totally take sides. At least officially, it says that it is neutral. With what's Ukraine, and even now Ukraine still, President Zelensky, recently he was in Washington and he repeated his accusations against Iran, and Iran warned Zelensky that our patience has limits. It means that, okay, you are not free, you are not allowed to say whatever you want, and then we stay quiet. As long as so far we've stayed quiet because we don't want to take sides. So the stated policy is neutrality. That's it.
But
so far.
But do you believe, yes, so far, but do you believe that presently Iran could be providing any kind of weaponry to Russia to help Russia pursuing its goal in Ukraine?
Theoretically, yes, it is possible. If they do it or they don't do it, I really have no information. If they provide Russia with any sort of weapons, it's totally out of my guess. I don't know. But theoretically, it is possible. We can't say, no, it is not. They won't do that because everything is possible. They say everything is possible in war and love. So theoretically possible, but officially, at least officially, no.
Okay. So a couple of days ago, US President Joe Biden assumed that, on his view, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the so-called Iranian nuclear deal, is dead. Do you agree with that? How do you see the current situation of the Iranian nuclear deal?
Yes, I do agree with him. And it's quite some time, not, for example, because President Biden said the day that President Trump left the deal, even before that, it was dead. The day that President Trump left the deal, and almost a few months later, in 2020, I think, when he ordered the assassination of General Soleimani, it was clear that the deal is dead. Yes, Iranians are trying to say that, no, we are goodwill, we still have goodwill, we are still interested in the deal, but the deal, it seems, that doesn't work anymore. Maybe they need to talk about a new deal, given that Iran resumed its nuclear program and its uranium enrichment officially now is at 60%. the Iranian authorities always insist that they are not pursuing a nuclear bomb, and they don't want to start an arms race in their region, especially in this region, in this volatile region. But the fact is that Iran has capabilities that when they clinched the deal in 2015, they didn't have it. So they have it. And it seems that if the West wants this trend to be stopped, it should make concessions. Not making concessions, it should try to see what Iran wants and try to reach a middle way that is accepted by both sides. But nowadays, what we see, what we feel is that it is Iran that so far had made concessions to no avail.
But then,
so yes, it is dead.
Why all this rhetoric, not only from Iran, but also from the West, talking about the nuclear deal? And I also hear from time to time the Iranians trying to pursue and to be in conversations with European Union officials in order to at least create a different agreement, because there are the so-called secondary sanctions, which would be quite of a hurdle in order to bring any kind of agreement between the EU and Iran. Why all this rhetoric, and why all the parts do not assume expressly that the deal is dead? Why keep feeding this narrative?
I don't know, maybe for Iran, maybe the Iranian government, I'm not sure. That's my own understanding, that they don't want people blame the government of Iran for the failure of the deal and its psychological effect on the society, especially on market and on economy. And, you know, a country which is under sanctions has a fragile economy. And announcing the deal is the dead from Iran gives a sort of, I think it gives a point to the West, that you say, oh, look, we wanted to work on it and you said it is dead. I think this is the same thing on the Western side. They don't want to announce it dead, because if they announce it dead, then the Iranians would say, look, we tried to work on it, you didn't want it. So neither side announces the failure of the deal, but it is dead. But they just don't announce it. Maybe, I think it was senior nuclear negotiator Abbas Araghchi, about maybe 2 years ago. He said that the nuclear deal is dead, and it is dead, brain dead. It is just on the ventilator. It is just kept on the ventilator. I think this is the case. So it's almost dead. But they don't announce it, maybe because of the blame game.
So, but at least to some sort, this is part of the Western interventionism in Iran, trying to limit and to bring conditions to the way Iran wants to protect its own sovereignty. But actually, Western interventionism in Iran has started long time ago. For example, I remember that the Western Bloc was directly responsible for the replacement of Reza Shah for Mohammad Reza Pahlavi on 1941 during the World War II. And after that, the event related with Mohammad Mossadegh's dismissal, the management of the tension involving the changes on Anglo-Persian Oil Company, as well as the 1963 White Revolution, were some of the most controversial aspects of Mohammad Reza Shah reign or era. Do you believe that these events were decisive to the fall of the Shah and for the success of the Islamic Revolution, because the Shah was always seen as a puppet of the United States?
Yes, and not just changing the monarchy from Reza Shah to Mohammad Reza. Even Reza Shah, he was brought to power by the UK. He was a UK agent, and everybody knows that. I think the most important point about the fall of Shah was his extensive relationship with the West, while he didn't pay attention to the people of Iran. It was corruption, his independence on the West, because, you know, in 1953, during the coup, he left Iran, he escaped from Iran, and then he was returned. after the coup was successful, he was returned by the US. And then during the years between 1953 to 1979, when the revolution happened, the Islamic Revolution happened, there were tens of thousands of American advisors, military advisors in Iran. So at the 1960s White Revolution, they say that it was also something that it was dictated by the US because they wanted to keep Shah under control and to give him some sort of public view, a good public view to the people. But, Iranian society is a sort of religious society. Shah was not a religious person. He didn't respect the religion in the society a lot. So the clerics, which at the time, during the centuries, the Shia clerics had always been a sort of, a source for people to take their grievances to. And at the same time, Shia clerics were totally independent from the state, from the Shah, from the government. So the clerics were also dissatisfied with the Shah, with his reforms, that they were Western reforms, Western-oriented reforms or Western-dictated reforms in a country that it had many problems back then. Those reforms were not maybe useful, were not maybe enough. Maybe it was not the time for those kind of reforms. Maybe Iranian needed different kind of reforms. So all of that led to a sort of dissatisfaction that led to the fall of Shah. And Iranians always look at the US as one of the reasons that they revolted against Shah. They say that the country was under the control of the US, and then they got their independence from the US. If those reforms especially 1960s, were successful or not, it seems that they were not successful, because if they were, people wouldn't revolt against the Shah.
So, but in the end, the so-called White Revolution was intended to develop society and bring Iran closer to the Western way of living. Aspects related with, for example, education and women were already very sensitive back then. But do you think that there was any positive aspect that the White Revolution had? Why do you believe it also failed? Because outside of the urban cities, the major cities, things are quite different. There was the shock between rural and urban societies, or what do you think was the main reason? Only religion?
No, not only religion. Another reason was that, for example, the White Revolution, what they call it White Revolution, it was supposed to get to distribute land among the peasants. I mean, they get them from feudals who had all the land, who owned all the land, and then transfer them to people, to ordinary peasants, to ordinary people to work on it. But as long as the agriculture industry was not developed at the same pace with these reforms, so people couldn't cultivate this land that they were given to them. Iran is a kind of country that is it has always suffered from water crisis. So a peasant, a farmer who doesn't have water, you give them hectares of land. As long as he doesn't have water, he doesn't have new methods of agriculture, he can't do anything, he can't cultivate. So so at the end, it led to the exodus from rural areas and from villages to cities. And these people, they migrated to big cities, especially in Tehran. They migrated to the slums of the cities. They made big slums around, especially around Tehran and other big cities as well. So it showed that this migration, this exodus from villages to cities, showed that they were not successful, the revolution, or what they meant. Maybe they had a goodwill. They wanted to distribute land to make everybody prosperous, but it didn't work. So when these migrants came to slums, they were living in bad conditions. And then they felt that there is no distribution of wealth in a country that was an oil exporter. They didn't feel anything from the wealth that the country had. Yes, there were some improvement for women, but at the same time, it was for certain group of women for elites, women that they belong to high classes, not ordinary women in villages. So given that a revolution happened, it showed that they were not successful. Maybe they had some goals, maybe they reached some goals, but at the end of the day, they failed to satisfy the population.
All right, but so many in the West tend to pay more attention to Iran now because of the so-called women's rights. Do you believe women are respected in Iran not only by the society itself, but also by the political power?
You know, after the revolution, and these are some facts. There are some facts and statistics to support what I'm talking about. The number of women who went to universities increased dramatically. Nowadays, I think half of the population, half of the young students are women, even more than half. I think last year, the university exam, the number of female attendees were far more than male attendees. Many engineers, doctors, lawyers, they are in Iranian society, you know, having a pilot, for example, female pilot. If you ask me, yes, we have female mechanic, we have female pilot, we have female bus driver. Then, for example, if you go to, for example, airports, I mean, Tehran airports, you can see female taxi drivers. So Iranian society is a thriving society. Women have roles. But I have to admit that there is always a glass ceiling for women. Women are respected, for example, in the society. I mean, when you go to the street, we don't have much, I mean, sexual harassment. No, we don't have much. There are cases, it's a big city, for example, in Tehran, in other cities, it happens, but generally, women are respected in the Iranian society. But I have to admit that politically, Iranian women don't have much political power. For example, I know that, for example, maybe in your country, I mean, Portugal's parliament, I don't know how many female representatives you have.
Around, I would say, 30 to 40%, 30, more or less 30, yes.
Okay, so in Iran, I think we have 16 female lawmakers out of 292. So you see, the share is small share. It's less than 10%. And there is a glass ceiling. So one of the reasons that I am somehow critical is that when it comes to cabinet, we don't have, yes, the president has some aides that they are women. President Rouhani had some aides that they were women, but we don't have a minister. And after the revolution, I mean, we are in the 43rd year of the revolution, 43rd, 44th year. Only one president, and it was President Ahmadinejad, that he had a female minister. She was the Minister of Health. Apart from him, no president, either reformist or conservative, none of them have picked a female minister. And this is one of the critical points that I have. Women don't have much share in political power and in political structure of the country. And this is one of the problems. Another one, so we have lack of political representation for women. And another one is the glass ceiling. So the glass ceiling, you can improve, you can go one by one, step by step, but when you reach a point, then it stops. So, for example, we have many universities in Iran, but you don't have many deans, female deans of the universities or female chancellors. You don't have. We don't have ministers. We don't have many female representation. For example, in various councils that Iran has, for example, we have a cultural council that nowadays that there are discussions about hijab. Then you see there is no woman on that council. How do you want to discuss hijab, which is something that it is totally related to women, when there aren't any women on your council? So these are some of the critical points. But generally, yes, women are respected, mothers are respected. But when it comes to they have a role in society. They are doctors, you know, they are in the society as men. But when it comes to those 2 points, it's not enough. We have some problems in those 2 fields.
And is it true that women in Iran don't earn as much as men for the same kind of work?
No, it's not true. But usually men who have a family, they get some bonuses, some perks that women don't get them. So, for example, when it is to Social Security, a female, for example, employee of the government and a male employee, they receive the similar, for example, amount of Social Security, similar wages. But when it comes to perks, bonuses, and these kind of things, for example, imagine someone is an unmarried female employee. She doesn't get those perks that a married male employee at his colleagues receive. There are these differences, but for wages, no, they are the same.
Do you think that in the end, there's too much expectation from the social role that women have when compared to the expectations built around men in Iranian society? For example, people tend to expect that Iranian women become mothers too early, they get married, they take care of children, or this is just a myth? What do you think? How do people in general look at women?
If we look at it traditionally, yes, they look at women as they say that the main job of a woman is to be a good mother, to bring children, to raise good children. But at the same time, they say that no, women should have their own role, their social role. But even if you want someone to be a good mother and at the same time they have a social role, you should provide some sort of infrastructure for them. You should provide them with some facilities. A mother who, for example, imagine a mother is a doctor. I have a sister and she has 2 children. And imagine her younger child is about 5 or 6 months old. Now my sister wants to return to work, but there are not daycares who accept this 6-month-old baby. Then when you talk to other people, they say, okay, let her stay at home and raise her children, but maybe she needs to be socially active. So the state, the Iranian authorities, let's say, as long as they say that, yes, this is the motherhood is a very sacred role that a mother should have, a woman should have, they should raise children, then they insist on women studying, having education, having a role in the society, having job. But how can she have a job when you don't provide them with facilities, with the things that they need to fulfill this role? So there are some sort of contradictions when it comes to in general, when talk the talk is beautiful. When it goes to walk the walk, then you see some contradictions. Those contradictions exist, and I can't deny that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So many times I try to tell people around me that Persians are actually not Arabs, and Iranians have a very different approach towards social aspects and the way they live. Do you consider women are free in Iran and have more freedom there than they have in other Muslim countries, especially the most stricter countries like, for example, Saudi Arabia?
The Arab countries that they are around us are Persian Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. I have never been to Pakistan. Pakistan and Afghanistan, they are not Arab countries, but I personally haven't been there. I can't say they are freer. Women in Iran are more, they are more free. They have more freedoms than other women because I have visited Qatar, I have visited Dubai, I have visited Saudi Arabia, especially Saudi Arabia. I can't say Iranian women have more freedoms than them. Oh, they are the same somehow. In Iraq, maybe in some of those Arab countries, women have better social freedoms than Iranian women. These days, Iranian women are somehow dissatisfied. I can say they are equal. No, none of them have Maybe in some Arab countries, for example, 10%, even their situation is better than Iranian women. But at the end of the day, they are somehow equal at the same foot.
Do you believe that the hijab should continue to be mandatory, compulsory use, or should it be a free choice made by Iranian women?
You know, hijab is a very controversial issue. But let me explain something. Iran is a Muslim country. 98% of the population are Muslim. And from this 98% population, out of this 98% population, 90% are Shia Muslims and 8% are Sunni Muslims. We don't go into those details. So what I'm trying to say is that hijab and Iranian laws and the constitution, they are based on Sharia law. And Sharia says women should wear scarf. I mean, this is a Sharia law. So this is a law that you as an observing Muslim should respect it. But some women are modern women. They don't want to respect a hijab law. They don't want to wear it. And I think nobody can force them. The point is that in Iran, so the controversy around hijab is that some women, okay, they are Muslims, but they don't want to wear it. And you can't force anybody to do something that they don't like to do it. At the same time, we have some dress codes, let's say some dressing norms, that it seems that somehow the women who don't like to wear hijab, at the same time, they are pushing those dressing codes to boundaries. And this is the point that it is making controversy. If they don't say, okay, we don't want to wear a scarf and okay, just my hair, that could be okay. But when things gets different, you know, maybe for a European or American, it may sound strange. But when you come to Iran, then when you see the society, then you see that, for example, for a woman, wearing a mini skirt is almost impossible. So maybe a young girl says, I don't want to wear a scarf. Okay, don't wear it. But I want to wear a mini skirt. Then this is the point of controversy. And as long as the Iranian women haven't decided which one they want to choose, this controversy remains. I am a religious person. As a religious person, I have to confess that I believe in hijab. And I think women should, to some extent, respect it. But at the same time, I accept that you can't force people to do what they don't like to do. It's controversial, very controversial. But after these protests, so there are some women that they don't wear their scarf. For example, I go to a pharmacy; it's very close to us, and the lady, the pharmacist, she doesn't wear a scarf. And I am an observing Muslim. I respect her; she respects me. There is no problem between us, as long as we can keep this relation out of respect. Keeping respect, I think problems will be solved. If I don't cross her red lines, and if she doesn't cross my red lines, we can react. We can interact with each other respectfully. That's the best way that I can put it. That's it.
As an Iranian, how do you look at the attempt by some Westerners to impose their way of living in Qatar during the World Cup? They're trying to force Qatar to abide with LGBT cause, with the rainbow, with the miniskirts, with the alcohol, so on and so forth. How do you, as an Iranian, look at this kind of attempts by the Westerners to boycott all the events that don't accept their way of living? Okay,
the Iranians who are pro-West, they say they encourage the Westerners to impose, to insist on your values. The Iranians who are traditional, the Iranians who respect religion, then they encourage Qatar. They say that, oh, Qatar did the best thing. It didn't capitulate to Western values. But you know, the point about LGBT and this kind of thing is that they are not very normal in our societies. We like it or dislike it. This is the fact about our society. There is a park in central Tehran that everybody knows that it is a center for the gatherings of the LGBTs. And people usually don't like to go to that park, you know. So this is not something that I say I don't like it. Yes, religiously, there are some bans on some sort of those activities, but the point is that these are not very normal things in conservative society, in Muslim societies like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. So if we are talking about respect, I think the West also, or the Westerners, should also respect our cultures. This is our culture. You like it or you don't like it, but as long as you are a guest, we have to respect you, but you have to respect us too. You can't say, because I am a Westerner, because I have my own values, I do whatever I want. No, it is impossible. And this is the same thing in Iran. You can be an LGBTQ, whatever, in Iran. As long as you don't announce it, you don't want to hold a gay parade, you don't want to announce it officially or publicly, nobody has anything to you. But when you try to impose it, when you want to show it to the world, when you want to show it to the other people, then they say that, oh, it's a bad example. Oh, so sorry. It's a bad example for my children. So people usually don't accept it. Sorry for my, so when it comes to Qatar, this is the same thing. People in Qatar, some say that, oh, they did the good thing that they stopped the Westerners from bringing all those signs and all those slogans to Qatar. And then the ones who are pro-West, and in Iran, we have a lot of people who are pro-West. They say that, no, they shouldn't, the Westerners should take these values to the West. I mean, it's the time for the Arabs to get to know these values. So there are diverse ideas about them.
All right. So Mahsa Amini's death recently marked the most recent protests with some civilians killed, but also with some police officers that were killed as well, although they are not mentioned. Can you speak a bit more about this and tell us what's going on? Because looking at the Western news reports, it seems that the political power is about to fall in Iran, but at the same time, it seems that nothing is happening besides around a dozen voices screaming and yelling a lot over one particular aspect. Can you please tell us more about the current situation?
Yeah, number one, as you said, Iran is not going, I mean, there is no revolution in the making whatsoever. And most of the things that you saw, it was on social media. On the ground, it was not that messy, it was not that populous. And let me tell you an example. Iran has a population of 86 million, okay? And almost out of this 86, almost 42 to 43 million, half of the population are women. Did you see any protest by women that, let's say, 200,000 women attended? No. Then let alone millions of women. And in Iran, in a country of 86 million, at least you need to half of the population to go to the streets, and then you can feel that, oh, the state or what the Western countries, the Western media call regime, is at the danger of falling down, even at the risk of falling down. So there is no revolution whatsoever. Yes, Mahsa Amini's death was an unfortunate event. It could be prevented. Really, it could have been prevented. It was a mistake. Sometimes you say wrong person in the wrong time, in the wrong place. And it was, but I can say it was a trigger point at the end of the controversy that was around hijab for some time in the Iranian society. And it was the point that it ignited some protests. Yes, we had some civilians' death. We don't have the officially they say about 300 people have died, including the security forces. We had the security forces, we had the Basij militia or Basij volunteers, they said. We had law enforcement forces that they were killed, and the majority of them, they were killed brutally. On my own Twitter feed, I shared some videos of the law enforcement forces that they were badly beaten and they were killed by the protesters, or I think they were more or less rioters rather than protesters. And protests have totally ended now. There is no protest whatsoever. There are some calls, the opposition, and the problem with these protests were that the ones who called for protest and encouraged the youngsters to go to the streets, they were living out of Iran. As long as you are trying to lead a population out of Iran, and you don't pay a price for what happens to these people on the ground, onto the streets, in confrontation with the security forces, this kind of, the so-called revolution, it gets to nowhere. So as usual, there were some riots, some protests here, there, 5, 10. But when you find 5 people here, 10 people over there, but when you see them on Twitter feed, on the CNN screen, then you say, oh, a revolution is going to happen. But it was not the case. Really, it was not the case.
You said that Mahsa Amini's death could have been prevented. How do you think it could have been prevented?
Mahsa Amini had been arrested for improper dressing, and she was taken to a center where police has. And police in Iran has different. For example, when it is a traffic police, car might park somewhere on the street, and then police takes it, confiscate my car and takes it to a parking. When I want to go and release my car, I have to pay some fines, and then I have to attend some classes. These classes, they try to review some, for example, traffic rules to me. This is the same thing about the people who were arrested for their improper dressing or not adjusting their hijab. And the problem with her that I say it could have been prevented was that the police forces who arrested her, and I think they were some women, female police, Mahsa was a guest in Tehran. She was on a visit to Tehran. Her brother said, "We are your guest. She's adjusting her hijab, she's adjusting her uniform, and let us go." And I think they could be somehow lenient. They could say, "Okay, they are not familiar with this city. Let them go. Okay, adjust your scarf and go." But they insisted of taking her to that police center for some sort of guidance, and all these things happened. She died of a sort of heart attack, and then she went into a coma, and all this, and she had some sort of underlying health issues, and she died because of those underlying health issues. But it could have been prevented. It was something, Iran paid too much cost for nothing, for something that could have been prevented.
All right. So I often see people like Masih Alinejad on the news speaking about the Iranian oppression toward women. This, I'm quoting her, considering that she is supported by US actors. Do you think she's part of a strategy to subvert the Iranian society?
She is, because the fact that she met and she has pictures with former CIA director, what was her name? I can't remember, Mr. Chubby. Then the fact that she met openly with the CIA director during Trump administration shows that she's a CIA agent, and she is part of the plan. Unfortunately, I can say fortunately, she failed, and she's been trying to create some sort of rift among Iranian women, within the Iranian society for years. Unfortunately, she has been somehow successful. I say Mahsa was the end of the chain of events. These events had started and they had been triggered by Masih Alinejad. And the problem with the Western countries, with European countries, with even American administration, is that they just listen to these people. They don't listen to more reasonable voices, as if they like these radical people like Masih Alinejad to be the representative. But she is not representative of Iranian women. She's not my representative. She's not my mother's representative. She's not the representative of the women in my neighborhood. So as long as she doesn't represent us, then how or why the US administration listens to her? Why President Macron talks to her? Talking is not a problem. Why do they express support for her as long as she doesn't represent anyone? This is the same thing about other women in the Iranian opposition. And another thing, another problem with this opposition is that I told you, the Iranian society is a religious society. Religion is part and parcel of this society. We have to accept it. Yes, maybe my neighbor is not very religious. Maybe her daughter doesn't wear a scarf. But at the end of the day, when they want to marry, they go to a cleric to marry them off. So you see, this is part of the culture. It is not just religion, it is part of the culture. And when you start insulting this culture, sooner or later, people get dispersed from you. And this is something that the Iranian opposition, this is the problem with the Iranian opposition and likes of Masih Alinejad. For example, you know, we have a day of Ashura, is the day that Imam Hussein, the third Shia Imam, you know, it has a long story short, he was killed about 1300 years ago. So the day of Ashura is a very important day for religious and non-religious Iranian women. Even people in Iranian diaspora respect this day, and it's a public holiday in Iran. People mourn for Imam Hussein. Then imagine on the day of Ashura, she releases a video of herself. She's dancing on the streets of New York. What do you think about her? They say, okay, she's fighting with us. She's fighting with our religion. Then you say, okay, she's not an eligible person to lead, to represent women. Then she has lost the cause. Yes, some women pay attention to her, but I think the number are little.
Before we finish, I just would like to make you two questions made by the audience.
Okay.
The first one from Mr. Jorge Pereira. He asks what Mrs. Fereshteh think about what's happening presently with women in Afghanistan. Now imposed they can't go to school.
Yeah, I've heard about it. And Taliban, when Taliban returned to power, unfortunately, even some in Iran, they say that the Taliban that is now in power and is back to power is different from the Taliban 20 years ago. They have learned their mistakes, but it seems that they haven't learned their mistakes. And it doesn't make any difference. The Iranian society, the Afghan society, the education of women improve the society. Educated mother always bring up educated children. They help to the prosperity of the city. And this is the mistake that the Afghanistan, the Taliban is making. I think Iran is using its influence because Iran has some influence, especially among the Hazara people and Hazara community. They usually try to convey some messages to the Taliban to be more lenient, especially towards women. And I hope this problem will be resolved soon because Afghan women, I've seen many Afghan women. At the University of Tehran, I had a classmate. She was from Afghanistan and her name was Fereshteh, the same as me. And she was a talented girl and she was studying women's studies. So you see, they are very talented and they just need the room. They just need this opportunity to given to them to improve their own self, their own families, and little by little, the Afghan society. I hope the problem will be solved soon.
So, and the second question is by Mr. Jamie Tinker, who asks you, how's the Jewish population of Iran being treated?
You know, Judaism is one of the official religions that they are accepted in the Iranian constitution, the Islamic Revolution Constitution. We have around 8,000, more than 8,000 Jews in Iran, and they are living peacefully with the Iranian society, within the Iranian society, because first of all, they are Iranian, and then they are Jewish. In the city of Hamadan, I recently visited city of Hamadan 2 or 3 months ago. There is a shrine, I can't say a shrine, it's a mausoleum of Esther and Mordecai. And they are a female and a male dignitaries, Jewish dignitaries, and their mausoleum is in place, visited by visitors. Jewish tradesmen, Jewish businessmen, they are living in our society. They have a representative. These 8,000 people They have a representative in the Iranian Majlis, in the Iranian parliament, and we are living peacefully. We've never had any sort of violence against other minorities, such as religious minorities, such as Christians, because we have Christians in Iran too, or the Jew. I can say, for example, in my vicinity, in the area that I live, I know 3 or 4 shops. They are carpet shops and antique shops. They sell very expensive things, and they are Jews, and they are doing their business, and nobody bothers them. So they have a normal life like other Iranians in Iran.
That's absolutely perfect. And like you said, there's at least 1 seat saved for the Jewish citizen in the Assembly of Majlis. So this is important, because if he couldn't get elected by any regular way, at least there is one of the seats is reserved for the Jewish community.
Even if one person from the Jewish community goes and vote to anybody, I mean anyone who is a candidate, he or she will go to the assembly. So it is, it's a seat for them, and they always have a representative in the parliament.
Yes, you have seats for minorities, and this is very much important for us to understand and to know that. Now, my last question, because in Tehran is 3 hours and a half more than here in Lisbon, so it's around 2 a.m. in Iran, and we want to let you go to sleep because it's quite late there. But it's my last question. Some years ago, I had the privilege to read the Book of Fate by Parinush Saniye. You probably have heard of this book. It tells a story, generally speaking, of a young girl full of dreams, but the hardships of both Persian society and culture vanished her dreams, as well as the hope around the Islamic Revolution also was killed, and the changes were seen with frustration by her. Considering that this book is meant to reflect Iranian people as a whole, what's your opinion on Iran almost 44 years after the Islamic Revolution, and which do you consider are its main achievements so far?
The main achievement that Iran received and was successful to get after the revolution was its independence. Number one, independence from the Western countries, considering a country that had been for almost a decade in close relations with the US meddling in its affairs, and for 2 centuries before that with the Russians and the UK, and before that with the Portuguese. During the Safavid eras, we had some wars in the Persian Gulf with the Portuguese. So we can say the main achievement of the Islamic Revolution of Iran, 43 years from the time that revolution happened, was independence. Another one was that we learned to stand on our own feet. Sanctions taught us to stand our own feet and to try to resolve our problems by our own, whatever we have. Another thing is that the situation of the country, infrastructure, education, women's situation, if you compare them with the before revolution, they improved dramatically, and nobody can deny that. And there are figures by the World Bank, by the United Nations, that they show these improvements. However, we are still a long way to go, and we have lots of things to do to improve women's rights, to improve their conditions, to empower them. And it is not necessarily just about women, about children, but I am usually very optimistic about my country, because I know that my country and my fellow citizen men and women, they have this capacity to improve and to advance the country. So if you ask me, I'm looking at it positively. We are making advances, maybe not very fast, but little by little, but we are making. We don't have a stable society that has frozen in a certain time. No, we have a thriving society. We have diverse ideas. You know, many people may not accept whatever I said during this interview, and that's their right to say that. And I have my own right to say that. But we are making progress. This is this thing that I can say. I can't hear you.
Mrs. Fereshteh Sadeghi, once again, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Here. I'm just going to ask you not to leave immediately because I just want to say a few words for the audience. But you can follow Mrs. Fereshteh Sadeghi on Twitter. You can also search for her articles in many media outlets through any search engine from the internet. You can find a lot of her content and you can learn a lot about Iran with her. I think this interview was quite important because it allowed us to understand some particular points concerning the Iranian society that can help us understand in the future, for example, why do we have these protests? Why? What's the position of the Iranian people towards not only the protests, but any other kind of incidents relating not only with Iran, but also in the region or even in the world? So thank you very much, Khodafez, Mrs. Fereshteh Sadeghi, for your help and for your effort here with us tonight.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. I wish you all a very pleasant night, and you can keep follow my channel on the forthcoming days, because I will resume again the assessment on the situation in the Ukraine. So Mr. Paulo Fania is saying Haile Mamnoon Khodafez. So some people know some few words of Iranian. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night.
So thank you once again very much.
You're welcome.